Hello and welcome to the Raw Preview Podcast. I'm Adam Wilborn from What Culture, joined by the Dadley boys of What Culture, Michael Hamflett and Michael Sidgwick, to preview tonight's episode of Monday Night Raw. But before we get into it, if you're a fan of this sort of thing, make sure you subscribe to What Culture Wrestling on either iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts from, for daily wrestling podcasts, where we not only review Raw and SmackDown, but also the Wednesday Night War between AEW and NXT pay-per-views. We have interviews, roundtable discussions, and a roundup of the week, complete with a bloody good quiz, of course, on Wrestle Culture. As I said, though, joined by Michael Hamflett and Michael Sidgwick to preview tonight's episode of Monday Night Raw. Don't forget as well, of course, we are doing this live on YouTube. If you want to send us any questions, we will try and get around and answer them before we are done here. But let's start, Michael Hamflett, by talking about the big topic. Could Lashley and Lana split tonight on Monday Night Raw? This is something that's been teased for a while, and you sense with Rusev's departure from WWE, this could well be inevitable.
Some might sense some sarcasm in your voice when you call this the big topic, but there was once upon a time where this was pretty much the only talking point on Monday Night Raw. There was a period of about 6 to 8 weeks where they persisted with this being the big story. And that wedding at the end of 2019 was so catastrophic that I think it sent the Angle and the careers of virtually everybody involved like flying off a cliff, to the point where Rusev never recovered and no longer works for the company. And Lana and Lashley were so bereft of credibility that this act was done before it even had a chance. I kind of feel sorry for the pair of them, to be honest, because their commitment to this cause was really admirable. And yet, as soon as they've just been normalized as an ordinary couple within the confines of WWE, the writers thought, oh, well, we can't have any of that. Absolutely not. No. Like, have we absolutely fatally wounded Bobby Lashley's career? Have we yet again, like, blown an opportunity to make something of Lana? Yeah, right, now split them up, make it even worse. I can't see all the work that they went to establish these two as a couple, the merits of splitting them up, unless they are chasing the YouTube numbers that they were once found as a couple. And even then, it was only because there was pictures of them like in very few clothes, or people have a fascination with clicking necking on thumbnails. Like, you're not if this is the polar opposite, they're not going to get that second time around.
First of all, I hope this podcast goes better than another podcast we've released recently, in which we said literally that Drew McIntyre is in front of our very eyes transmogrifying into Roman Reigns, because that was definitely the content of the podcast. That was definitely the content of the podcast that we recorded. And yes, and that was definitely the nature of the debate, which proved so divisive and such a furore. So I hope I hope people actually listen and watch this podcast, because that would be incredibly effective to the idea of what we were actually trying to put across. Idiots. I hate you all. Some of you I really like. Some of you I really like. The vocal supporters. But seriously, if you're going to comment or critique something, you're probably best off actually ingesting and receiving the content. What was the question, Wilborn? Was it about Lana and Lashley?
Indeed.
Well done for ingesting Wilborn's content, Sidgwick.
Right, okay. Right. My God. So, right, Lana and Lashley, right? You know what my favorite bit about this angle is, right? There's no big headline-grabbing angle, this inciting incident as to why they might be threatening to break up tonight on Monday Night Raw live from the Empty Performance Center. With the Lana and Rusev breakup, it was quite emphatic. Rusev came back and Lashley was necking on with Lana, and Lana had like legs wrapped around Lashley's bloody legs and arse, and it was all sort of softcore pornography, and Rusev looked absolutely gutted. You had the side-by-side thumbnail, you had the big kiss, you had Rusev looking like, oh my God, my life, not just my career, my life is over. So the next time you want to do Rusev unhappy with WWE, boom, picture. Thanks for that, WWE.com. There was this huge cuckolding angle, and then you had the big bluster of the wedding. You had all these big, divisive, artless, but effective headline-grabbing moments to get over the idea that these people are breaking up, and you should want to see the man fight the new man, the man you like, versus this like bastard Lashley. Literally, as far as I can tell and remember, I'll be honest, I'm not paying that much attention to pro wrestling as I would if it was like good and in front of fans. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is Lashley just like getting pissed off with how annoying Lana is? That's the premise of the storyline, isn't it? He's simply realised, shit doesn't half go on.
You're exactly right. He's just fed up with Lana. She's me. Once you've got tired of looking at her, in his eyes, at the very least, he said he's going to get himself a new wife. That's his words. He said, I'm going to have to get myself a new wife. And then last week, I think it was, in the midst of that match with No Way Jose, he just got out of the ring and went, please, just shut up.
Did he write this himself that one time that he rolled his eyes during one of her promos on Raw? Then they didn't acknowledge it again for weeks and weeks. Do you think he was just trying to work this into existence at the time? Like, she's an ineffective wrestling manager, but that didn't look as the reason why he got with her when he first stood on the stage with the necking on back last September or whatever it was. Vow renewal, by the way, is the answer to your question, Will, and that's what we're going to get. That's where all this always leads. Vow renewal. Another wedding in an empty venue. Like, there was no guest the last time because nobody wanted to attend. Now nobody can. This is going to be a retelling of something awful is happening to people at the moment. Nobody can attend their weddings. WWE are going to mock you for it with your two least favourite characters.
I love how this is like a facetious suggestion, and it's still the one that actually is the only viable possibility and will almost certainly be happening, because I was trying to think of a wrestling-sized way out of this storyline. I mean, the guy's just simply annoyed with it. I would love it just to subvert everything that we expect of pro wrestling, and particularly an artless strain of it, like this wedding. Is I'm perversely entertained by it at times, but no one's ever going to convince me that it's like high art or really earnestly compelling or good. But because there's no big inciting incident or visuals along the way, I was kind of just half thinking Lashley would just go, piss off, I'm sick of this, and then that would be it. And I think that would be fantastic. But no, wedding vow renewal, that would be like a big picture, like value range wedding ratings grab, because I think the Raw rating for the wedding got a 2.4 million, which is like the biggest one in ages. That was bigger than the post Royal Rumble Edge return bump.
It went half an hour, mind. We don't need that in, like, with the whir of that ceiling fan going around and one socially distanced religious figure in the middle of it all.
There's just a worry in my head that Vince is going to book Lana getting speared by Bobby Lashley accidentally, which is only going to end badly in my eyes. But yeah, I sense they're only heading one way. Quick shout out to the comments section. Don't forget, as I said, leave some questions in the comments. We'll try and deal with them before this is all over. So thank you to Aaron Merkel for your donation. That really does mean a lot. Thank you so much for that, Aaron. Lincoln Jack Donme, I always butcher your second half of your name, but he was one who went to bat for us on that Drew McIntyre video the other day, as Eric Vasquez is chatting with him in the comments, and Jay Gorman, who made that wonderful image for us that you may have seen doing the rounds on Twitter yesterday, including for the Dadley boys, Andy Murray, Simon Miller, and of course our lovely editor Phil Chambers as a panda. But let's talk a little bit about Drew McIntyre. It looks like he is set to defend his WWE Championship next against Seth Rollins, who I looked, because I understand that people may have complaints with Seth Rollins getting a title shot despite losing at WrestleMania. And I read somewhere that recently he is only second behind King Corbin in terms of amounts of losses on the whole WWE roster. And yet he appears to be the number one contender for the WWE Championship. Sidge, we talked about Drew McIntyre becoming Roman Reigns in so much as he is becoming watered down. You were angry at some of the comments. I was angry we didn't just get Roman Reigns anamorphing into Drew McIntyre on the cover image, but still. How do you think they're going to have Drew respond to Seth Rollins tonight? And what amazing comedy can you expect?
Oh, I don't know, but I think this is a big, genuine test of Drew McIntyre's credentials, because he needs to make Seth Rollins, and by this I mean the writer putting words into his mouth. So God, I'm still sore over that critique. Do you understand? Right. When I say he's gonna have to make it interesting, hopefully the material is more bland than it is terribly lame and unfunny, like a lot of WWE babyfaces promos can be. Realistically, I've got very little interest in the match between Drew McIntyre and Seth Rollins beyond it will probably be pretty damn good, because the workers involved are pretty damn good when they are at their best. That is the sole limit to my anticipation of this feud. Seth Rollins is leagues better than he was last year, but that is kind of in microcosm the curve by which we rate WWE, because he was putrid last year, like genuinely the worst version of the default babyface yet. He was the new Roman Reigns last year, much like there's a new Roman Reigns this year, much like Roman Reigns is a new John Cena. Comment section, that was the point we were trying to make. Realistically, if they want to try and get this over, it's going to be impossible because it's in an empty arena and it's irresponsible to go ahead with. But if they want this to go over, for me, the best route I can imagine this taking is if Seth Rollins puts himself over as the guy who was basically Drew McIntyre, except he fulfilled the prophecy, he fulfilled the destiny. He didn't have to go the circuitous long way around like Drew McIntyre did. He didn't have to prove himself to be a catastrophic failure and then have to physically go through all of the toil of reinventing himself. He was essentially the chosen one, except no one called him it, and he accomplished everything. He turned at the right time. He won the title pretty much as soon as he became a singles guy, or a year later. He is everything the company wanted him to be and more, and he should be the champion and not Drew McIntyre. It's well-worn stuff. It's possibly tethered in enough reality to make it convincing and believable. And to give Seth Rollins credit, after I've just kind of incinerated him there, his promos have been really quite good in this empty arena era. So, yeah, I mean, I guess they could try and work this into the storyline. I suspect it's going to be that kind of meta, this is my career up against yours, extended Wikipedia entry feud that they tend to do. But, if the promo delivery's there, it should be good enough, I guess.
Yeah, this can get over if they decide it's over, because there's no crowds there every week to determine whether or not this is receiving crickets or actual pops. Drew, to not fall into the trap that Seth fell into last year, I think part of that will be determined by the quality of the matches, because this time last year we were hoping for the best for Seth, and then he went on to have an absolute banger with AJ Styles at Money in the Bank. A proper unexpected gem of a title match from Seth, and a contemporary classic from AJ when he didn't particularly seem capable of them anymore. Seth is on the AJ Styles side of things this year, in that he'll be, hopefully the one capable of pulling this banger out of Drew when Drew is now in this quite high pressure spot. But there are no fans around, so you can only look at recent precedent rather than how great that was 1 year ago. We have Drew seemingly settling in to this like John Cena adjacent US title challenge WWE champion, where he takes on an opponent a week and he proves himself a solid, dependable all-rounder. And Seth Rollins, the guy that knows how to talk in that empty venue, a guy that can change his cadence and his delivery and even adjust his content slightly without worrying about the cheers, the fans. I wouldn't say I've got like high hopes for this, but it seems the empty arena era seems to suit this sort of thing better than crowds, because there's a good chance I think the audiences might get bored of this unless the content was white hot, and it's just not something I could have seen from these two otherwise.
Before we move on and talk about some excellent matches that we have got coming up tonight on Monday Night Raw, I should deal with a question from Ethan Wendelken in the comments. As I said, make sure you stick some more in them. Before we finish up, we'll try and answer them. Ethan says, Drew or Braun, who is the better champion? I suppose they've both, Michael Sidgwick, been handed the sort of generic babyface stuff, but who do you think can handle it better?
Drew McIntyre by far. I think really the measure of a WWE champion these days isn't in the material, because the material's been pretty wretched for the last 2 decades and more than one has got over. So realistically, Drew McIntyre is a far better in-ring worker. He's got a kind of disposition as yet that I think Drew McIntyre knows the role, and I think he knows the pitfalls of the role, and I think he can kind of gently insert a self-deprecating layer to the material he's been handed, with some of his like sort of reluctance to go full John Cena with it. I don't know, there's a certain cadence that I get from Drew McIntyre that I think it's a knowing kind of, I know what the role is, I'm going to try and do my best. Braun Strowman to me just feels like he's totally in that WWE bubble. He's never been outside of it like Drew has twice in his early career and in his wilderness years away from it. I think Braun Strowman is far more likely to do whatever they tell him to do, and judging by the material they lumber their performers with, whatever they tell him to do will be rotten.
Braun once had the intangibles and now they're lost, didn't he? He once had that feeling, that it factor, the guy that could turn up live and be given something as daft as tipping an ambulance over and it becoming the talking point of the week, strumming a double bass like it was a guitar and just having it fall apart in his hands, or catch like a girder with a grappling hook live. There are times when you have to jump on momentum like that, and they didn't. And then wrestling's really fickle in that regard. You never really get that back. And every reaction for Braun since then has felt a bit more forced than it should have done. And he's stuck now holding the title with that reaction. If there was reactions, obviously.
I feel very happy for Braun becoming Universal Champion. I think it's deserved in terms of what he's given the company, as much as it said you've given on to his antics, let's just say, on social media. But I kind of feel that just by the basics that we outline in that video, talking about Drew and I suppose in WWE's eyes, the man who can no longer be named in Roman Reigns. It's just the fact that I think Braun is much better as the strong and silent type than being given the generic WWE style promos. But let's move on.
We should put him on a moment of bliss then.
Exactly. Let's talk about 3 excellent matches that we have got coming up tonight. All 3 Money in the Bank qualifiers. For a split second there, I thought, who won the Money in the Bank match on the men's side last year? And then I remembered Brock Lesnar, of course, because we got the Brock Party stuff. But anyway, Michael Hamflett, Rey Mysterio versus Murphy, Aleister Black versus Austin Theory, and MVP versus Apollo Crews. All first-time matches. All look really good in my book.
Yeah, I mean, this is well-intentioned WWE television in a time where WWE making television is rooted in bad intentions. All of these are the type of things that we've seen in the last couple of weeks on Raw, where they try to normalize the current circumstances and just run episodes of Raw like there's a crowd in attendance. Aleister Black didn't need to go 27 minutes with Apollo Crews, just as we didn't need the relentless Austin Theory, Street Profits tag team matches and the like. Last week's Raw felt, for the first time in the empty arena era, like a 3-hour Raw, because it wasn't split up with matches from back when there was crowds that were actually feeling like they were speeding by compared to these empty performance center matches. All the wrestlers will try their best. There will be moments of magic, I think, in Mysterio and Murphy, because it just strikes me that the spot construction between the two could be exhilarating. Like Murphy goes way, way, way over the top in his plagiarism of New Japan finishes, but him hoofing Rey Mysterio's head off, or indeed Mysterio trying to counter one of those moves, will create something gift-worthy, something like what we maybe saw in the NXT Cruiserweight division last week. There's a certain curiosity about MVP matches. I guess the fact that he was on the Money in the Bank poster is slightly concerning, considering that match the other week was to suggest that there was going to be an Apollo Crews push. So MVP could well win here. I'd be lying if I said I was excited about any of these, but I think at least one of them will be a surprise. And that's nice, isn't it?
Yeah, I think Buddy Murphy. Is he going by Buddy Murphy, or is it just simply Murphy?
It's Murphy, sorry.
All right, Murphy. Right,
Thank you, Cedric.
Where are your manners?
That's Murphy's Law.
Well played, sir. Well played.
No one's played well. No one's playing well. The thing about Buddy Murphy versus Rey Mysterio is that, some of the sequences should be quite exhilarating, even though there's no one to be exhilarated watching it. If Kenny Omega is by far and away the best empty arena wrestler worker that we've seen over the past couple of months, then by that extension, Buddy Murphy should be about a quarter of as good as he is, because that's what his entire act is. So what I'm saying is he should be able to make these halfway worthwhile, where Kenny Omega can make them like almost life affirming if you try and forget the wider circumstances. So yeah, that should be really good. MVP, I don't care. Like, I think he's a good promo. I don't understand what the hell he's getting in the ring for, to be perfectly honest. Like, I don't have any real residual affection for the era in which he came up. I understand a lot of younger fans will, because that's what they're nostalgic for, and there are nostalgic blinkers with whatever era he came up in. MVP had an absolute rubbish match with it. Was it Rey Mysterio he had the rubbish match with?
Yeah.
I mean,
he called it his retirement so his kids could watch him have a singles match, and yet he remains.
Yeah, I mean, it's impossible to have a bad match, so I've got no faith in him having a good match with someone who isn't Rey Mysterio. And to be honest, Austin Theory, I don't want to sound like a Jim Cornette disciple, like just anti-spot monkey stuff, but what is Austin Theory's character? Why should I care about him? Has he said a word on the main roster yet that's of any substance or at all? Like, who is he? I don't understand who and what an Austin Theory is. I don't think this match is going to shed any further light on it. As much as I do like Aleister Black in the ring. Yeah. No, Rey Mysterio is always great. That's my takeaway.
So you're the three you are going for, Sidge, to qualify?
I'm going to go for Rey Mysterio. I'm going to go for MVP because as much as I've just buried him, I do think he's a great, great talker and he should be able to do something of note in this weird match, whatever it is. And I'm kind of hoping Austin Theory through chicanery because Aleister Black is, God bless him, so pull-faced. I just can't imagine him anywhere near the orbit of something that could potentially be fun.
Amplet?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Black, but only because I think they've probably thought of the obvious before they've thought of the obstacle, which is, as Cedric points out, how you drop Aleister Black into the wacky warehouse that's going to be this Money in the Bank match in a couple of weeks. The two things don't work together whatsoever. But then his trajectory over the last 12 months hasn't been what I think any of us would have predicted. So this can just be one more wrinkle to that dressed up as a push.
Let's move to the comment section and see some of the questions they've been asking. Actually, let's start with Eric Vasquez, a regular contributor. Hi, Eric. Thanks for
Hello.
Talking about Money in the Bank, in fact, Eric says, whoever wins Money in the Bank, should they cash in the very first night back in front of a live audience? At least the most sensible briefcase holder to do so. Sage, why don't you take that one?
I've said before, I, for obvious reasons, cannot bloody wait until we get back into the arenas. And if too many libertarians keep going insane, that won't happen for a good number of years. So just America in general, just calm down. Calm down. Liberty's great and all, but you know what? Still survival. A lot better. A lot better. So just calm it down, please, for the love of Christ. I haven't waited all these years for AEW to become a thing for you to ruin it with your insanity. So just calm it down and stay home if you can.
Cedric revealing the true motivation behind that there at the end.
Can you make us an all-time run? Can you make us an all-time run? We're having Kane ruin Kenny Omega's all-time run. It's absolutely backwards if you ask me. Hate it so much. But sorry, Eric Vasquez. I think that's as good a big angle as any. And I do think there'll be a kind of a reset because we can't really judge these shows as reflective of the creativity or lack thereof of the companies promoting them because they're all completely mitigated by these circumstances. I think the first week all of these shows come back, and if they are all coming back together, if a blanket statewide thing is lifted, then they will be looking for huge angles to make you interested in one promotion over the other in that second week. And I think a cash-in is the best idea. And I think a cash-in without fans there is going to look weird as hell.
Before I get your thoughts on it, I just want to give a quick shout out to Matthew McFadden, who says, would like to see MVP spend the entire Money in the Bank match convincing everyone else to hire him as a manager, only to get black masked off the roof to oblivion.
Wow. Jesus Christ.
Matt Rains also says, hey guys, hope you're all doing well. Yes, you too, Hamflet. The war continues with you. Who would you guys have win both Money on the Roof matches? And when do they cash in as well? Hamflet, why don't you take this one?
Whoever Matt Rain's least favourite wrestlers are, I think I'd go for. I think I pitched this maybe somewhere else, but Sasha Banks winning Money in the Bank right now actually feels in line with a decent story. I think they're telling on SmackDown. Her there with that briefcase is that very literal thing that will ultimately get between her. Fraying friendship with Bayley is one I really like. And they've put work in. It's like with the Mandy Rose and Otis thing. I just like seeing work that the writers and the characters that they're trying to get across actually paid off in some capacity. It's so hard without any particularly exciting destinations for storylines to feel that exciting in this period, and that's one for me. So I think that a little bit of this could be me clinging on to the nostalgia of them two in general, but I just think it's decent work, and Sasha having the briefcase is something that they haven't done with her before as well. For the men's, it's hard to look past Aleister Black if they want a babyface to win it. But the more I think about the setup of Money in the Bank this year, I keep visualizing Baron Corbin in all of the fantasy booking moments. All the comedy you could do with him, all the cut-off spots you could do with him, all the prop stuff. I don't particularly want him to have it because I wasn't excited when he held it the last time. and I wasn't bothered. It was probably the only time in Jinder Mahal's title reign where I was glad Jinder retained, because it was like, well, at least that's one less anxiety to have that Baron Corbin hasn't got this briefcase. Corbin thinks he's getting heat because he stopped being good after the King of the Ring and we all stopped complimenting him. He thinks that's how heat works. So I dread to think what 6 months of heat carrying that briefcase is while he waits for an opportunity to cash it in. But yeah, he's the one I suddenly visualize in this match more than anybody else. So I'm finding it difficult to look past him over anybody, let alone like another babyface.
We talked a little bit about this on our podcast earlier on today, which is well worth checking out. Not only do we speculate on who could win Money in the Bank, but we also speculate on some of the spots you can expect at Titan Towers. To move on to usage and your thoughts around this, a lot of people in the comments, there's Jay Gorman and Solly Perfect 10 talking about Ali, who of course almost won the Money in the Bank last year. Is he going to avenge the Brock party? Is he going to win as the hacker? I suppose he could, I don't know, we were talking about the lifts earlier on, he could hack the elevators.
Right, okay. I really like Ali. I think whatever this hacker bollocks is going to seem significantly, profoundly miscast. I think it's nice that they're doing something with him. I just see those Matrix effects on one of his little computer screens and just laugh at how out of touch they are. And it sort of breeds a complete distrust in me about what they think a hacker is or how this is actually going to turn out on television. I would just like to see Ali, the incredibly relatable, genuinely to his bones, very good guy, win the Money in the Bank briefcase in an underdog narrative, and then just say up front, I'm going to challenge for it on this date because I'm not one of these pissants who needs to steal a win. I just think it's such a honourable thing for a babyface to do that really hasn't been mined at all. Rob Van Dam did it, when was it, 2006?
Mm-hmm.
And it just launched a Snakebit career high, and it sort of worked because he's just had a massive set of balls on him. Massive set of balls. I'm going to take Cena to the limit. This is like at the nascent Super Cena period as well. So I'm going to beat John Cena for this title, and I'm going to tell him the date on which I'm going to beat him. And I just think it's such a ballsy, actual thing that a decent guy would do. I'd like to see Ali do it. If not Ali, I don't care if he's not scheduled for the match R-Truth. I said in the podcast earlier, they need to go full Treehouse of Horror with all of pro wrestling at this point. And I want to see the respective aces of each major American organization be R-Truth and Michael Nakazawa.
The Ali pitch, Rick, they've tried that twice and never actually seen it through. Kennedy said he was going to do it and then had the worst year of his career. And Daniel Bryan said he was going to do it, and they used it to turn him heel when he went back on it to kind of steal one against the Big Show. It's an angle that would suit Ali down to the ground, wouldn't it? To say, well, I keep having this WrestleMania moment stolen from me, so I'm just going to lock one in instead. Like, there's a lot of things. The more we kind of talk about this and the more he gets pitched, the more it seems perfect. Not least when, as a hacker, he could hack into WWE's door locks in Titan Tower and lock the other wrestlers in other rooms or something stupid like that, because they still believe that all hacking is done from like a 1980s action flick.
Who raised the flagpole? And it's Ali. Final few questions here then before we wrap up. John Oldfield says, are WWE going to regret mistreating and firing Rusev and the Revival, or will they both disappear? Of course, today we saw the Revival or Scott Dawson. I've forgotten what he's got, Dax Henderson or something on Twitter, sharing an image that seems to suggest the Revival are going to return as the Revolt wherever they turn up. What do you think on them and some of the other WWE releases, Hamflet?
I think first, the Revolt is a fantastic name. It's one of them situations where it's really hard to not have your prior WWE career linked to whatever you're going to be doing next. But the Revolt obviously allows people to remember what the problems they had with WWE in the first place. But also, if we work on the assumption that they're going to end up in AEW, that they're kind of revolting against that entire tag division, the tag division that is theoretically, though no longer the case, been shaped in the vein of the Young Bucks, which is the rivalry that the match that people have been wanting to see for years, even before AEW existed. That's existed in being the Elites universe. We know that's not really the case now. Kenny Omega and Hangman Page are tag team champions, a long way away from that kind of generic early style that Dynamite propagated. So I think the matches and the whole look and everything feels so perfectly placed for the revival. Was it in terms of releases going just specifically to AEW? Sorry, the rest of the releases.
I think just to whether or not they'll disappear and now they're not with WWE.
I'd like to think that it's not just AEW, but the market for wrestlers in general has improved as a result of the mainstream scene improving. I was long critical of AEW's kind of like stance on like wrestling being the saviors of wrestling when the independent scene was likely to suffer, but it being flooded with name talent like this, I feel will ultimately be for the best. Anyone that AEW doesn't sign, anybody that New Japan doesn't fancy, or indeed wrestlers that don't particularly fancy work in the style of New Japan, will almost certainly get work in the independent scene. It allows them, in some cases, a chance to do something they've never done before, which is work extensively out of the WWE bubble. We've talked loads about Drew McIntyre. It's informed his story that he went away and started again. If there's wrestlers like, for example, a Zack Ryder that desperately wants to get back to WWE, then what a way to do that. There's lots of examples of guys that started again at times in their careers where you might have thought they were finished. So even if they avoid the big name companies, I think there's, and I hope as well, I hope it's not just a thought. I'm trying to be optimistic. I hope that in wrestling's future, whatever that looks like, there'll be spaces for these wrestlers to start again, if that's indeed what they want.
Final question I'm going to leave to Coach Mar for you, Sige. Is Garza versus Andrade a long-term potential destination?
It's one of those where they could just as easily hire on Raw in a couple of weeks, which would be a big shame for me, because I think there's story there. I think Garza, certainly not so much Andrade in his verbals, because I think he's really quite, I don't want to say poor is the word, but I just don't think it's something at which he excels particularly, whereas Angel Garza could really carry the load verbally for a program like that. I think Angel Garza's got this knack where it feels like he despises everyone he's in the opposite corner of the ring to, and he's so detestable in his wonderful body language that he can sort of summon that from anybody else. I would love to see it as a long-term feud. I don't think WWE's mentality, given that they aren't native English speakers, they would build towards it as a huge premium concern. I wouldn't look forward to it for SummerSlam, put it that way.
As much as we'd love to see it.
As much as it would be absolutely fantastic, yeah.
I'm going to leave the final comment here to Matt Rains, who says, no coincidence that Hamlet has NXT on his wall behind him there.
That's good.
Right. This has been the Raw preview. Do let us know your thoughts in the comments section or on Twitter at WhatCultureWWE. And I'm pleased to announce that we're going to be doing these 4 p.m. podcasts, BST UK time. Going forward, tomorrow, myself, Adam Cleary, and Adam Nicholas will be doing questions you most want answered. So please do get them over to us or stick them in the comments when that starts at 4 p.m. tomorrow. And then myself and the Dadley Boys will be previewing the Wednesday Night War and SmackDown and doing a very special Get the Table on Thursday at 4 p.m. too. So join us for all of those. And as I said, let us know your thoughts at WhatCultureWWE, and make sure you subscribe to What Culture Wrestling for daily wrestling podcasts. Whilst you're on Twitter, you can follow all of us. You can follow Michael Hamflett at
Michael Hamflett.
Follow Michael Sidgwick at.
Make sure to check out the new Fiona Apple record. It's incredible. You can follow me at M Sidgwick.
You can follow me at Adam Wilborn. Happy 420, everybody. You can follow our lovely editor, Phil Chambers, at Phil My Chambers. And as I said, you can follow us all at What Culture WWE. But this has been the Raw preview. My thanks to the Dadley Boys. Thank you for watching, and we will see you soon.